everyone, today we are going to be doing another summary and overview of a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Now, this book, it just brings real life together and then ways to tackle problems in your life. Now, Viktor Frankl was this incredible psychiatrist, and he went through one of the darkest times in human history. And if you were to think about what the darkest time in human history is, what pops up in your mind? World War II, the Hitler time, the Nazis time. So he went through that time, the Nazis' concentration camps during World War II. He was in that camp. And in that camp, the people were imprisoned there and they were not regarded for, they were disregarded. No one cared about their health, their food, or anything about them at all. So they were in a very, very, very bad, hopeless, miserable state. Now, in the preface of the 1992 edition of this book, Frankl tells us something really interesting. So he wrote this book really, really quickly. He was so eager, almost in a rush, to share something that had become deeply important to him, which was the idea that life still has meaning even when everything around you seems to be miserable, hopeless, or broken. He wanted people to see that even in the worst suffering, life can still matter. Even when you're completely hopeless, life can still matter and pain can have purpose. The book is split into two parts. Part 1 is about Viktor's personal story, about what he lived through in the concentration camps. And then part 2 is about the theory behind it, something he called logotherapy, which basically means finding healing through meaning. Now, the first part gives evidence for the second part. It's like Viktor wrote this book trying to be like that. He's not just telling us what he thinks, he is telling us what he lived through and then how he coped with it so that we can use those methods for ourselves. Viktor also explains how he even ended up in the camp in the first place. So he actually had the chance to escape in the start. He could have gone to America and been safe. But here's the thing. His parents were old, and he remembered this biblical commandment, which was to honor your father and your mother. So instead of leaving them behind, he chose to stay with them in Vienna. This decision to stay out of love and loyalty eventually led him to the concentration camp. Because of this decision, he ended up in that concentration camp by the Nazis. But it also shaped everything he later wrote about, how meaning comes from love, sacrifice, and responsibility. So the story is written by someone who saw humanity at its absolute worst and still believed that life could be beautiful, that there could still be purpose. And maybe that's something we can all take with us, that no matter whatever happens, there's always a reason to keep going, to care, and to love. So let's start with part 1, which is experiences in a concentration camp. Viktor divides this part 1 into 3 main phases, each with its own psychological state, meaning each phase changed how people felt, thought, and saw life. Now, phase 1 was the shock of arrival. It all started with a train, hundreds of prisoners. They were all tightly packed together in a train and they didn't know where they were going. And then finally the train stopped at a place, and this place was the most infamous Nazi camp. When people first arrived at this camp, most of them were immediately sent to gas chambers. And whoever survived from the gas chamber were forced to live in horrifying conditions, being dirty, freezing, starving, and sleeping shoulder to shoulder in overcrowded bunks. So you can imagine what a miserable state it was. They were beaten for even the smallest mistakes. Every day was filled with fear and exhaustion. At this stage, the main feeling everyone experienced was shock. They were in complete disbelief. It was like their minds couldn't fully understand what was happening. Many even thought about suicide because there didn't seem to be any way out. So you can understand that they were in this stage of shock, because like if someone just drags you from your home and just locks you up in a place and beats you every day and makes you live in a miserable place, you would be in shock at first and you would be thinking like, why is this happening to me? Now, moving on to phase 2. Phase 2 is about apathy and emotional numbness. Now, after the initial shock from phase 1, something strange and tragic happened. People slowly stopped feeling. And this is called apathy. This was apathy. Not because they didn't care anymore, but because their minds were protecting them from pain. When you see suffering and death every single day, your emotions start to shut down just to survive. The prisoners were beaten and starved, and some of them would end up dying. So other prisoners would see this. They would see fellow prisoners dying every single day, and they almost felt nothing. It wasn't cruelty, it was emotional survival. And this could be like applied even to like real world right now. So if you see war going on for so long, for months and months and months, you start to think of it as something normal. You start to not care anymore. So that is how the prisoners were trying to survive. They were undernourished, constantly hungry, and obsessed with food. Many prisoners daydreamed about meals or recipes they'd never get to taste. They lost interest in almost everything else. But Victor noticed something deeply human still remained. Those with religious faith, those who believed in God, had some religious faith in them, often held on to hope. They prayed, they believed in something greater even there. And many prisoners, no matter how broken, could still pause to admire something small, like a sunset over the barbed wires. That tiny glimpse of beauty reminded them that the world outside the camp still existed. Mostly, though, what they longed for the most was rest. What they longed for was rest, to be in peace. Just a few moments without being shouted at, hit, or humiliated would be everything to them. Now, Victor was constantly aware of how unpredictable fate was, how life or death could depend on pure chance. Once he stayed on a transport that others warned him against, and that decision accidentally saved his life. Another time he missed a transport that ended with everyone on board burned alive. So when he actually got on one, which everyone warned him of, he survived it. And when he missed one train, so on that train, everyone got burned alive. So how life and death can be a pure chance, basically. He saw the best and the worst of people. Some prisoners became selfish, trying to gain tiny advantages just for themselves. But every now and then, someone did something kind. They offered comfort, they shared a piece of bread, or simply gave a few kind words. From all of this, Victor learned something that became the heart of his philosophy, which is, we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Even when fate is cruel, we still have the freedom to choose our attitude, our values, and our humanity. He also saw how powerful hope could be. When prisoners believed that something meaningful still lay ahead, maybe a loved one waiting for them, or a goal they still wanted to achieve, they were more likely to survive. So, if you have a bit of hope inside you, you are more likely to survive. Being hopeless is never the solution. Victor himself used his background as a psychotherapist to help others keep that hope alive. He reminded them that their lives still had purpose, even there. Now moving on to the last phase, phase 3, which is about freedom and its psychological aftermath. So when the war finally ended, the Nazis' war and everything, and So the survivors, they were freed, but freedom didn't feel the way that they imagined it would feel. At first, it felt very unreal, very unnatural. They thought it was like they were living in a dream because they didn't actually think that this day would be possible. Many couldn't even believe that it was over, but soon new emotions appeared, emotions like bitterness, anger, and disappointment. After so long holding in their pain and rage, like bottling it up inside them, some former prisoners, they lashed out. Their anger came boiling out. Others, they felt disillusioned when they returned home and found people acting as if nothing had happened. Victor says that many survivors, including himself, discovered that loved ones they had been hoping to see again were gone. Meaning when they wanted to see people that they love, maybe their mother and their father, for again after everything was over, were gone. So even in freedom, there was heartbreak. Even though what they dreamed for, to be free, there was still, at the end, there was heartbreak, there was disappointment, there was still hopelessness, there was still something miserable. So, part 1 of Man's Search for Meaning shows the journey of the human spirit through shock, numbness, and freedom. But more than that, it shows that even in the darkest places, people still had choices. Choices like to be kind, to believe, and to hold on to hopes. Victor's message is that meaning isn't destroyed by suffering. In fact, sometimes it's found through it. Sometimes something bad happens to you, and you find something through it. Now let's move to part 2, which is called logotherapy in a nutshell, basically. This is where Victor takes everything he learned from his experiences and turns it into philosophy, a way of helping people find meaning in their lives. We'll go through each step by step, in the simplest way possible. Now, what is logotherapy? So logotherapy, it might sound like a very complicated word, but let's break it down. Logos is a Greek word meaning. Therapy means healing. So logo means meaning and therapy means healing. So logotherapy literally means healing through meaning. Victor believed that the biggest thing driving us as human beings, the thing we all really, really want, isn't pleasure, isn't money, isn't power, it's not success, it's none of that. It is actually meaning. He actually disagreed with 2 major psychologists before him. Sigmund Freud, who said we're mainly driven by pleasure, which is the pleasure principle, and Alfred, who said that we're driven by power, a striving for superiority. But Victor said no. What really motivates people from deep within them is the desire to find meaning in life. You might have a lot of money, you might have a lot of power, you might be Bill Gates, but if you do not have meaning in your life, it all means nothing in the end, because there's no meaning. Now, the problem, the existential vacuum. When people don't have meaning, Victor says they fall into what he calls an existential vacuum. It sounds a bit fancy, but it just means an empty space inside, a feeling of inner emptiness or boredom where nothing seems to matter. And here's the thing, Victor believed this isn't rare at all. He said it's actually a widespread problem in modern society. In today's world, it is very widespread, a very common type of problem. You see it when people feel lost, unmotivated, or constantly ask, what's the point of any of this? That is the existential vacuum. When you think in your head, like, what am I even doing? There's no point to this. There's no point in life. There's no point in studying. Something like that. That's the existential vacuum. The feeling that life has no purpose. And that's exactly what logotherapy tries to help with. Now, how does logotherapy help people find meaning? Logotherapy doesn't give you a one-size-that-fits-all answer. There's no single meaning of life that fits for everyone. For everyone, their meaning of life is different. Everyone has a different meaning for their life, a different purpose for their life. So you cannot just say that this should be set for everyone. He described 3 main ways that people can find meaning. First, by creating or accomplishing something. For example, writing a book, raising a child, building something, or even just doing your job with purpose. Second, by experiencing something or someone deeply, like appreciating beauty, truth, or goodness. But Victor says the deepest experience of all is love. Love allows you to see the true essence of another person beyond their flaws or suffering. Third, by adopting the right attitude towards suffering. Now, this one's powerful. Victor says we shouldn't go looking for suffering because no one should want pain. No one wants to experience pain. But when suffering is unavoidable, when suffering just comes onto us, like we lose someone that we love, we get sick or face some tragedy, we can still find meaning by facing it bravely. In that courage, we show who we truly are from inside. Now, a key technique called the paradoxical intention. It sounds fancy again, like logotherapy, but it is actually interesting. It means that sometimes the best way to overcome a fear or a problem is to actually do the opposite of what you'd normally try. So you're going to change up your methods and you're going to do the opposite of what you normally try. For example, imagine you have insomnia. Insomnia is basically when you cannot sleep. So you can't sleep. Most people try so hard to fall asleep that they make it worse. They make their insomnia worse. Victor says, instead of trying to sleep, try to stay awake as long as you can. And yeah, it sounds a bit weird because you stop worrying and forcing it. Your body relaxes and you fall asleep naturally. Because when you're trying to force yourself to sleep, you're tensing up your muscles. Your body is not relaxed, but once you stop worrying about that and you stop forcing it, your body relaxes and then it falls to sleep naturally. It's like tricking your own anxiety by turning it on its head. Victor ends his explanation of logotherapy with something really, really important. He says that one of the biggest causes of that existential emptiness inside you is the idea or belief that humans are just machines. Some people believe everything we do is determined, meaning that we don't really have any type of freedom. We're just reacting to things automatically like machines. But Victor completely rejects this idea. He says, no matter what happens to us, no matter how controlled or limited we are, we always have freedom. Freedom is to choose how we respond to other people, to the people around us. Freedom is to decide what meaning we give our experiences. If something has happened to us, how we give it meaning. Like if someone did something bad with you, what type of meaning do you give it? Or if someone did something good with you, what type of meaning do you give that situation or experience? Freedom to shape our inner life, even if we can't control the outer one. You cannot control the world and the people, but you can control your own inner life. So we have these different type of freedoms that we can use. That's what makes humans truly unpredictable and truly human. Now, just a little postscript, which is the case for tragic optimism. So later in the 1984, Victor added a short essay called The Case for a Tragic Optimism. Optimism means something like hopefulness and confidence about the future, okay? That you have some hope, you have some confidence for the future or the success of something. Now, here he talks about something that he calls the tragic triad, the 3 unavoidable parts of life. Like, you cannot avoid this in life. It happens to everyone. Pain, guilt, and death. But he says, even in these tragic things, there's still room for optimism. There's still room for some hope. each one can become an opportunity. Pain gives us the chance to show courage and strength. Guilt can motivate us to grow and become better. Death reminds us to live meaningful now so that when we look back, we can feel peace about how we lived. So pain, it will give us the chance to show how strong we are, how we get through our pain. Guilt, because like we feel bad about what we did or something, so it can motivate us to not do those type of things again, to grow and to become better. And death reminds us that we have to live our life in the best way possible, so that when we look back and we're closer to death, we can be at peace that we have lived our life the way we imagined it, the way it should have been. So these 3 things, you can still get meaning out of these. So even in tragedy, Victor finds hope, not a naive, fake kind of hope, but a deep one. The kind that says even when life hurts, it's still worth living. So that's logotherapy completed, healing through meaning, and it is a reminder that even when life feels empty, there's always something, a person, a purpose, or a perspective that can bring your life meaning again. Victor's message isn't about avoiding pain, it's about finding purpose through it. So this is the complete summary. I tried to do it in detail. So this is like the complete summary of the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, and I hope this video really helps you understand Victor's ideas more easily and taught you about some useful things that maybe you can use in your own life.